Mwahahaha. Hello, my darlings, and a very warm welcome back to the library is open, so I hope you brought your library cards, my darlings. Now, if you wonder what all those theatrics were about, it's because the time has come to launch my Halloween-themed reading event. So you may remember, or you may not have even have seen it, but all of those things are fine. That when I was doing the Waterstones Summer Reading Challenge, I realised that I really like themed kind of reading TBR plans and so on and so forth. And a couple of people in the comments when I was asking what kind of content you wanted to see next mentioned that they'd love it if I did a kind of creepy Halloween, October-y kind of reading vlog series. So that is what I have decided to do, and I've got all the materials that I need. I'm wearing a sort of autumnal shirt, lots of oranges and stuff. I've got my candle from IKEA that smells like campfires, and I've got my themed tea from, of course, Bird and Blend. I know I always mention them. I promise I'm not on any money. I'm just sharing the good news about tea. And today, in honour of the launch of this series of vlogs, I am drinking a spiced pumpkin pie chai, which is absolutely delicious. I actually wanted to use, they do another one called Campfires and Vampires, which is a kind of more, it's not a fruit tea, but it's not a black tea either. But I can't find it. So, I mean, clearly that points to the fact that I own too much tea because I can't even track it down. But hey ho, we adapt, we move on. So, yeah, this is going to be the launch video of that kind of Halloween-y content, and I will update every Monday throughout October, up to and including the day of Halloween itself, the 31st. And, yeah, so what I really wanted to do is, because horror's not necessarily my go-to genre per se. I like a thriller, as you know, I like a mystery, I like a cozy, and I like a kind of contemporary fiction type thing. But I thought, you know what, no, if people want to see it, I'm going to make the effort this year. But I'm going to do it also a little bit on my terms as well, so that's where the cheat comes in. So I think what I'm going to do is, well, I don't think, I know that's what I'm going to do. I've come up with, because there's 5 weeks, 5 Mondays I should say, I've come up with 5 sort of themed categories, and I'll be reading the material for the category 1 week and then updating the following week. So it'll be like a week in loop sort of thing. So the first update will come on, I think it's the 3rd of October is the first Monday. And then so on and so forth. So the categories are, and what I will be reading, why, what was that? I don't know. I think that was a vague attempt at, you know, a sort of Transylvanian accent, which, you know, it is A, inaccurate, and B, you know, not well carried out. But hey ho, you know, this is who I am. So anyway, without further ado, first week, the category is going to be the modern vampire. Now I say this because, like, vampires are kind of my favourite, like, creature, horror-y kind of category, if you will. And, you know, I've always been obsessed with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I kind of grew up with. And, you know, but I didn't want to go back and do, you know, kind of the classics again, like Anne Rice and so on and so forth, or Bram Stoker and all that business. So I thought I would look at some kind of modern versions of that for this week of the reading vlog. So I'm going to read, and I don't have a copy of it with me because it is on the Kindle. Because Paperback's not come out in the UK yet. And it's Fledgling by Octavia Butler, which is Octavia Butler, of course, famously sort of writer of Afrofuturism and science fiction and so on and so forth. And this is her last book, and most famous one. Well, I mean, they're all famous, but I think probably Parable of the Sower is probably the one that's best known by people. But I'm going to read Fledgling. As I say, it's her last book. It came out about 8 years ago, I think, originally. And this is the story of a young girl who wakes up in the woods with no memory of who she is or how she got there. And she thinks she's about 10 or 11 or something, but it turns out she's actually a 53-year-old vampire. And she, as I say, she remembers nothing about her life, but she has this desperate need to feed. So I think this is going to be a really interesting kind of spin on the vampire thing. So she's kind of a traditional vampire, but also I imagine, given the author, there's going to be a lot about, you know, the bigger picture. So vampirism as metaphor and so on and so forth. Octavia Butler writes brilliantly about, you know, race relations, social class, state of play in America, and so like particularly for Black people. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting and a sort of modern spin on it. And I thought I'd contrast that with this one that I mentioned in my most anticipated, I think, which is the debut novel by Sunyi Dean, The Book-Eaters, which, just to very quickly go over this again. So it says, hidden across England and Scotland live 6 old book-eater families. Children are rare and their numbers have dwindled, so when Devon Fairweather's second child is born a dreaded mind-eater, a perversion of her own kind, who consumes not stories but the minds and souls of humans, she flees before she can be turned into a weapon or worse. And I thought, well, that kind of speaks to vampirism as well, doesn't it? There's something really interesting about I think the vampire myth in terms of like our everyday kind of society. You know, I think it can be read really as a metaphor for consuming, you know, the way we consume the earth basically. And I find that really, really interesting, and I wanted to spend a whole, you know, kind of week of reading, reflecting on that. So those are those two. I will put all the links to better descriptions, more full descriptions, I should say, about all these books in the description. So there you go. Second week, I thought I'd try and do a kind of mashup genre, if you will. So as I've said, I love a thriller, but I thought, I wonder if I can find like a horror thriller. So I did a bit of Googling around and I came up with this. So it's Nosferatu, obviously named after the famous vampire, by Joe Hill, which is billed as a terrifying thriller, but I also know that it has some supernatural or kind of fantastical elements as well. So I thought I'd call week 2 Thriller, like horror and thriller. Thriller, horror, thriller. Don't you judge me. This actually sounds really interesting, but also a bit like it's not for the faint-hearted, so I'll just give you a précis of what's on the back. So it says, young Victoria McQueen has a gift for finding things. All she has to do is ride her bike through the Shortway Bridge and she'll come out wherever she needs to be. That's where the supernatural kicks in, you see. It's an ability she keeps secret because no one would understand it until she discovers she's not the only one with a special gift. Charlie Manx takes children for rides in his '83 Rolls-Royce Wraith with its Nosferatu vanity plate, driving them away from their families, their homes, and even their own humanity. Only one kid ever escaped Charlie, Vic McQueen, but by the end of that nightmare... but the end of that nightmare was just beginning of their life and death battle of wills, a battle that explodes a quarter century later. Because now Manx has taken Vic's son, and Vic McQueen is going to get him back or die trying. So, I mean, that's quite evocative, isn't it, in terms of, you know, abducted children and so on and so forth. And that's quite a common trope in thrillers, but with this kind of horror-y kind of twist as well, that I thought would be really interesting. Plus, obviously, the iconography of the title, Nosferatu. So that's Thriller Week, which will be the second week of this. Oof, put your tongue in, Stuart, honestly. Third week is going to be, I'm calling this, The Past Comes Back to Haunt, because I want to do 2 kind of contemporary horrors that are both about callbacks to, you know, events that happened in the past that have begun to have resonance in the present. And these are going to be Ronald Malfi's Black Mouse, which is his latest novel. I've never read from him before, but he is a Bram Stoker Award finalist, which seems promising. And The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, who is a Native American writer. And I thought that was interesting in itself as well, because I think this is going to be a sort of almost own voices, but in the horror genre. So Quick Précis of Black Mouth. For nearly 2 decades, Jamie Warren's been running from darkness, haunted by a traumatic childhood and the guilt at having disappeared from his disabled brother's life. But then a series of unusual events reunites him with his brother and their childhood friends, and none of them can deny the sense of fate that has seemingly brought them back together. Nor can they deny the memories of that summer so long ago, the strange magic taught to them by an even stranger man, and the terrible act that followed them all into adulthood. In the light of new danger, they must confront their past by facing their futures and hunting down a man who may very well be a monster. Ooh. And The Only Good Indians is 10 years ago, Ricky, Gabe, Lewis and Cassidy shot some elk. It happens every year. It's been happening forever. It's the way it's always been. Don't like that. But, I mean, in the real world. But this time it's different. Now, a decade later, these men are being stalked themselves, hunted, bound to their heritage, bound by society, and trapped in the endless expanses of the landscape. These men and their children must face the ferocious spirit that's coming for them, one at a time. So this is really interesting, and this looks like it might be a horror of like the natural world as well. The blurb kind of mentions like forces of nature and stuff as vengeful kind of spirits. But you know, I love that idea of things in the past. It's a great trope coming back to haunt the present. So there we go. Week 4, again, I have nothing, I don't think, to show you, because I'm going to call this one Nightmarish Novellas. I spent ages coming up with these titles, can you tell? And I wanted to do a kind of old novella in the kind of genre, and then a newer one. So I decided to go with the kind of birth of the Gothic novel, The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, which is really, really short, but kind of introduced all the elements to, I would say, I think it's Victorian, isn't it? It's Victorian fiction, or just before, of what we now see as the Gothic novel. So it's not necessarily horror per se, but definitely the precursor to what that would become. And the second one I want to read is more, I believe, body and environment horror, and it's called What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. Again, these both on Kindle, and that is a retelling of Edward Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. So that might be quite interesting, you know, it's like classics and then classics retold. I love seeing what kind of resonance can be found in modern reinterpretations of classic texts. So I'm going to do that. And then for the actual day itself, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this day the Schlocky Horror Show, by the way. That's what the theme of that one is. And I found a free version, an audio version of a book called Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix, who wrote My Best Friend's Exorcism, and also, I mean, he's done several, Final Girl Support Group, I think, and also Horror Store, the one that's like a horror book set in IKEA. But basically, that's a non-fiction book that looks at the really lurid kind of horror books from the 70s and 80s, you know, the sort of mass market paperbacks. And I thought that could be really, really fun. It's only like 5 hours listening time, so I thought I could do that. And then that inspired me to think, oh, you know what? I want some really camp, kind of schlocky horror that I used to read in the 90s. And I used to read a lot of, like, point horror books, they were called. R.L. Stine got his start there, I think, before pre-Goosebumps, or possibly at the same time. And there was an author called Richie Tankersley Cusick who wrote quite a few that I read. So I was going to reread and try and get hold of a copy of an old one of hers called The Mall, which was about someone being stalked in a shopping mall, basically. But then, as I was looking for it online, I found one that I haven't read, but just seems perfect for this channel, and it's called Overdue. And it's about, I believe it's stalker, serial killery vibes, definite kind of slasher horror vibes, but set in a library. And obviously, this channel is The Library is Open, so obviously I'm going to read that. So that's my TBR for the Halloween event, which I don't know what to call. Shall I just call it The Library is Haunted or something? Or, I might do that, actually. Let's call it The Library is Haunted, TLIH. But this is going to be the first year that I've really, really gone full out and done a whole month of just reading horror. So I'm actually really excited about it. I'm worried I've overfaced myself slightly, particularly with the Through-All one, Nosferatu, but because it's like nearly 700 pages, but I do get the feeling it's going to be one of them sort of like page turners, and I have just read like 2 big chunky boys, Babel and Fairy Tale by Stephen King, so both of which were great, by the way, in the end. Spoiler. So you know what, I think I'll be okay. But yes, so that's my TBR. What do you think? As I say, check out more info on that in the description. Let me know which ones you're looking forward to hearing about, because I'll review them in the vlogs. That's what I'll do. I'll read and then review, and that'll be how the weeks disseminate out. Tell me your favourite spooky books as well. Tell me what you might be reading this Halloween season. Do you like to do themed reading? I'm coming into it a lot now. I'm really, really liking it. I don't know why, but I just do, and that's good enough. Or if you want to just leave a love heart or a picture of a book or a picture of a nose for the book sniffing, then by all means do. Oh, hang on. Let's just finish ourselves off with a good old book sniff. Paperback's good. Paperback's good. And that's all right. That's the one. But, yeah, whatever you like. Love hearing from you, as always. But for now, keep your doors locked and your curtains drawn. There's a reason I never worked in horror films. I can't imagine why it was. But for now, the haunted library is closed. So put those library cards somewhere safe. And I will see you for the first in the library is haunted Halloween vlogs on Monday the 3rd of October. I had to get one more in, I'm sorry. Take care. Don't let the bugs bite. Mwah.